Good day. Today's video is about animal studies. So finally starting with this. And in your textbooks, it's from pages 126 to 140. Yeah, I condensed it a bit, so it's not that much. So yes, we're looking at animals and where animals came from, what we do with them, why we actually breed them, and what we use them for in agriculture. So let's first of all look at the domestication of all these animals. If you knew or didn't know, most animals that we farm with today actually were wild. You know, their ancestors were wild animals. If we take like the cow over here, they lived completely differently than the bulls and the cows and the cattle we work with today. So in today's time, the domestic um, well, this one's a bull, domestic bull, looks a bit different than its wilder ancestor. Same thing with the pig. Yeah, the wild pigs or the wild boar actually had a lot of hair and looked way differently now than our domestic pig. But as you can see, we actually selected certain animals to breed with that had less hair. So we actually selected those individuals that didn't really have hair so that their offspring or their babies had less and less hair until like today we have a domestic animal that doesn't have any hair on it, or there is hair but we don't really see it. And the same thing with, if you take the example of the chicken, this is the red jungle fowl that actually still exists today, as the name says, in the jungle. But over many hundreds and thousands of years, we have actually selected them to look a bit different, like our domestic chicken. Then obviously within each type of animal, we have different breeds and so on. So even within breeds that are different, even individuals look different from one another. If we think of humans as well, you look differently than even your sister or your brother, and you also look different from your friends and even your parents. So each individual looks differently, but they still are a specific species. Okay, so then with this domestication, we bred and raised certain animals under human control. That's what makes them domestic. Humans can handle them. So they are not specifically easy to handle, but humans work with them. We have a hand in how they grow up, what mate chooses the other mate, and so on. We control basically their lives. So there are fully domesticated animals, and then you get partially domesticated animals, such as the ostrich is a very good example because there are actually farmers that breed these animals, but they are not really, I want to say, human friendly. We can handle them, they are basically still wild animals. Yes, we breed them, we can try and select which male and which female breeds with one another, and we can handle the chicks, but they are still partially wild. That's why partially domesticated, partially wild, 50-50. They're 50% domesticated and 50% still wild animal. And then a third category of animal or within domestication, I want to say, is your fully wild animals, such as your eagles, as an example. And with eagles, yes, you do have these wild bird sanctuaries where if this eagle got hurt, people actually do take care of them. Even in wildlife reserves, we find that some of these wild animals are being handled by people, but the fact is they're still wild, and if we set them free back into the wild, they'll be able to fend for themselves. That's actually what it's about. So they can find their own food, they can care for their own children without human intervention. We don't have to be there for them to be able to survive. But with our domesticated animals, if we aren't there, if we don't feed them, they actually will die. They will struggle to fend for themselves in the wild. So basically, they are dependent on humans. That's why they're domesticated. Partially domesticated, yes, farmers do feed them, those that farm with them, but they will also be able to fend for themselves if they were let loose back into the wild. Okay, so those are your three categories: domestic, partially domestic, and wild of the animals. So then, with livestock in general, why are they important to us, and specifically in South Africa? Why do we farm with specific animal types? Okay, so the first type of animal we actually farm with here are cattle. And you need to know a couple of important things, what they are used for, first of all. They are used for meat. We usually eat cattle or cows. Secondly is for milk, dairy. So we do have certain dairy cattle. We get milk from them that we can drink, we can make cheese from, we can make yogurt and so on. So these products can be used for something else. Then thirdly, we actually use the hides of the cattle. This is an Nguni hide, so we can make leather from it. We can make handbags, shoes, so many other products from the leather. But it comes from the leather, comes from the hides or the pelts of the cattle. So these are three main functions of cattle in South Africa while we breed with them, while we farm with them. Secondly is our sheep. Sheep is also used for meat. We eat the meat. Secondly for wool, for clothing and so on that we make from the wool. And also we can use the milk and make things like sheep cheese. It's not very common in South Africa, but well, for most people. But yes, we can actually make cheese from their milk. And thirdly would be goats. We farm a lot with goats. Usually from the milk we make goat's cheese, and also from their wool or hair, or when I say we also use that for fibers to make clothes and so on, or scarves. Is used a lot. Then also from their pelts or the leather that comes from their pelts, we can actually make gloves. Get a couple of some of these workers' gloves made from goat skin. Then fourthly is our pigs. Many pig farmers in this country, and yes, we use them for meat. And then also the pelts can be made into leather, and things like leather shoes can be made from their pelts. And lastly, we actually use their hairs as well, the pig whiskers and from the tail, those hairs from the tail. You can actually use and make paintbrushes of it. It's very sought after by the artists and the artist industry. They actually use it for these paintbrushes. It paints very lovely. Okay, then fifthly is our poultry, meaning birds. So it can be like your ostriches, your chickens, even ducks. I think some people eat geese. So any of those, the bird species. So we use them for meat, and we use them also for eggs. Think of chicken eggs mainly, but yes, even ostrich eggs we can eat. And then their feathers, especially the ostrich feathers, we use to make dusters and for ornaments and so on. Then lastly, equines. This is just a very fancy word meaning horse species. It's not just horse, but it's things like horses and donkeys and mules and so on. And it does include zebras as well, but we don't breed with zebras, so they're not farm animals. So mainly, first of all, is your horse, and they're actually used for sporting events, sporting and just shows, and also for farm work. A lot of horses are still used on the farm to help plow in some circumstances, and also to carry people or farmers from point A to point B, even workers to round up cattle and so on. So they can also be work horses. Then secondly, here I have a donkey. They are very good pack animals. They carry a lot of things, and they can also be used to plow and so on, and especially to carry or be hitched onto a carriage and carry people and carry luggage and so on. Don't have enough space, but the third one would be a mule, and a mule is actually a cross between a donkey and a horse. So a horse and a donkey mated, and then the mule was produced, and the mule looks a lot like a horse, just with longer ears. So you can literally see there's a donkey somewhere within this mule, and they're also very good pack animals. So they do the same thing that a donkey does, carry a lot of things, and can also help plow and pull a cart and carry things. Okay, then you guys need to know that there are different types of digestive systems. Different animals have different types of stomachs. So first of all, the bird species, avian, also refers to birds. They have a crop. It's the sac and the front of the chest that also helps grind certain foods. Sometimes it's pebbles or even rocks in the case of an ostrich in this crop that helps grind all the food and the seeds and things they've been eating. So they're unique in this category. Then Secondly, you guys need to know is the monogastric animals. Mono means one, so basically it means one stomach, just one stomach, monogastric animals. These are things like your pigs. I know we don't really farm with cats and dogs, but it was in this picture. So cats and dogs will also be on this, but a farm animal that has only one stomach would be your pig. Only one stomach. Then we have our ruminants. Ruminants usually means they have 4 stomach compartments. They do only have the one stomach. There isn't 4 stomachs, only the one stomach, but that stomach has different sections, or as I said here, compartments that help with the digestion of the food. So think of it as 4 rooms or 4 chambers within this large stomach. So your animals that have this is like your cattle, also your sheep and your goats. So what they do is they eat grass or eat feed. Later on they go lie down, and then actually after they have swallowed it, after they've eaten it, it goes into the stomach, but then later on they actually regurgitate all the food or throw up all the food back into their mouths, and then they re-eat everything, and then it goes back into the stomach, and later on they can actually do it for a third time. So they really grind and try and get the food very fine, and then each time they regurgitate it comes out of one of those 4 stomachs, so of the 4 compartments in the stomach. All of it just helps with the digestion of the food and so on. But the point is, ruminants have 4 stomach compartments. They are unique compared to pigs that only have the one stomach and the one room in that stomach. Then we have a hindgut fermenters. Those are things like your rabbits and your horses. They have a specialized area, not in the stomach, but next to the stomach, called the cecum, and there's actually where fermentation happens. Fermentation is that process where alcohol is actually starting to be produced. So there's a lot of bacteria in that section in the cecum, and these bacteria help also digesting the food. So they have a cecum, which makes them important. The thing that you guys need to know very well is the difference between monogastric and ruminants, these two. The other two I just put here for interest's sake, and also so you guys know the difference. So horses are unique that they are hindgut fermenters, but you need to know about the ruminants and the monogastric animals. Okay, then we have to take a look at cattle. As we mentioned, cattle was the first type of animal we mentioned that we breed with, we farm with in South Africa. Okay, so within cattle, there are actually different types of species. I know it's big words, but you guys need to know this just to compare the two with one another. So there are 2 main species, is Bos indicus and Bos taurus. How to remember it is indicus. Indi sounds like indigenous. Indigenous means they come from our country, from within our country, close to home. So indigenous animals are from the country we live in. So Bos indicus, indigenous, they are things like your Nguni, Afrikaner, here they give the red Sindi, Concray and so on. It means they are kind of like the older type of cattle species. Here you can see they have humps on their backs, they have big dewlaps there in the front of their necks, they usually have very big horns. Yes, they look very different than, say, this type. I know they're dairy cattle and so on, but they look a bit more primitive, if I can put it this way. They look older, ancient even. So they're Bos indicus, they look ancient. Then we have the Bos taurus, and Bos taurus are usually your European breeds. They don't come from South Africa, they come from another country. They usually come from Europe, and they are like your Frisian and your Swiss cattle. Swiss meaning Switzerland, so they don't come from South Africa. They look a bit more like we imagine a cow to look like these days. So they would be Bos taurus. If you know indicus means indigenous and it comes from Africa and so on, the default or the other one would just be taurus, means it doesn't come from here. So this is your exotic breed, basically. Okay, so these are the 2 main species, indicus and taurus, but then within this species, there are different breeds. Same with within the Taurus, there are different breeds. These are two breeds within the species. Okay, so this breed, the indigenous breeds, what makes them unique? They have very strong legs. You can see here very tall and very strong legs. They can carry a lot of weight. They are very, heat tolerant, meaning they can live in hot areas. Think about it. We're in Africa. It's very hot, so they can handle the heat. Then they have very good pigmented skins, meaning they have color. Now this guy's white, but if you can see underneath the white, it seems like a bit of black patches are coming through, meaning their skin is black. Pigment, meaning there is color. There's color to the skin. So this guy has a black skin, and this brown cow, it's cow, sorry, must probably also have black skin underneath. So it means pigments, they have colored skin. Then they are very disease resistant. So, I mean, here we have a lot of pests like flies, ticks, fleas, so on, and diseases like your red water disease, heart water, you name it. So that caused by a lot of things, protozoa, bacteria, and so on. So they are very resistant to this, meaning we don't really have to baby them all the time. We don't have to give them a lot of medication. We can just leave them. They can survive on their own because they're from this area, they're from this country. Okay, and then the exotic breeds, the Taurus, what makes them different or unique is they have very large bodies. You can actually see they look a bit heavier with their small itty bitty legs compared to the indigenous breeds. Then these guys are less heat tolerant, meaning they come from a very cold country. They come from Europe. They can't really handle the cold as well. Then they are less disease resistant. Unfortunately, these cattle, especially if you bring them to South Africa, we need to give them medication and things when they're sick, otherwise they can die. Then is labor intensive because we have to give all this medication, we have to look after them the whole time. It is labor intensive. Okay, then the characteristics you guys need to know within cattle. Know how to identify a bull, the male, and a female, the cow. So how do we know why this guy is a bull? It has a heavier chest area. The chest, usually with the neck and the hump, if it has a hump, usually is thicker, more muscled, and heavier than, say, the butt area or the rump area. Then also it has male characteristics, meaning it is very muscled. Even the butt, you can see, is very muscled. The shoulders are muscled. Even the head, it looks strong. So this would be the male. The female, in contrast, has a heavier rump, a big behind, and a small chest area because the calf needs to fit through, the hip joints when it is born. So they are bigger on the back side than on the front, and they look feminine. You can see the head, a lot really feminine and delicate compared to the bull's head. He has much more muscle and looks butch, tough. But the female or the cow has less muscle and looks more feminine. Then with the cattle, we can actually, different breeds, we can also divide into what they're used for. So as we mentioned in one of the previous slides, we use cattle for beef, for meat. We eat them for meat, and we also use them for milk. So we have beef breeds and we have dairy breeds. First of all, the beef breed, we have those that are indigenous and those that are exotic. So within Africa, the breeds we have is the Afrikaner. Here's an example of what the Afrikaner looks like. Don't look at the color, because the colors can differ. But look at how the horn slants. They do have a horn. They do have this hump on the back, and they are very muscled. Okay, so what makes the Afrikaner unique is they have actually a very good temperament, meaning you can handle them. They're not really angry all the time. And also they're disease resistant. Then we have, by the way, you guys need to know the names of the breeds, Afrikaner, meaning it comes from Africa. Then Bonsmara was actually made in South Africa. They have thick pigmented skin, so they always have, well, many of the time they're red, but they do have black skin. The skin is pigmented. Then they have a very high fertility, so you'll always get babies from them most of the time. Then thirdly is your Nguni. They're also indigenous. They have multicolored skin that makes them so unique. Look at this pattern. They're white with black spots or white with red spots and so on. And also they are highly parasite resistant. ticks and things don't really stick to their skin as easily as other breeds. And also to take note, this guy also has a hump at the back for the bulls. Then with the exotic breeds, we have the Angus. They're usually black, but not always. And what makes them unique is they are polled. Polled means they have no horns. So they're very nice to work with because you don't really get hurt easily. Then they are highly adaptable, meaning no matter where you breed them or where they live, they can handle the heat, they can handle the cold, and so on. So they are adaptable to the environment. Then in Brahman, they are actually from East Asia, there around, from the east, they originated. So you can also see they have large dewlaps and this hump on the back. They are known for easy calving, so they don't struggle when they give birth, and the mothers are very protective of their young. Then thirdly is the Hereford. They're usually red with these white faces, usually. They are fast growing, meaning you can quickly start breeding them, and also they have high fertility, so they can easily become pregnant. Yeah, those are your 3 exotic breeds. Then we look at the dairy breeds. The main 2 is the Holstein. Kind of looks like an Oreo cookie. This and the Frisian usually looks like an Oreo cookie. So the Holstein, these guys are used for milk. So we usually use the cows. So high milk yield, they produce a lot of milk. You can see how large the udder is here. And they are the heaviest dairy breed. They are kind of heavy, big looking. Then your Jersey, the Jersey cow is very heat tolerant, so they will be able to survive in South Africa. And their milk actually has a lot of fat in it. So it's very nutritious actually. Then thirdly, the third type we have is a dual purpose breed. Dual purpose mean we have them for both meat and we breed them also for milk. So the one example would be the Simmental. They usually are white with these, they're kind of like Luke Pinto, white with this color patches. They are known for easy calving and also they produce a lot of milk. Then you have secondly your red poll. They usually are red, that's why they're called red poll. And poll meaning they don't have horns. So they're red and they don't have horns. Brilliant name. Then they are very fertile, so you can get a lot of babies from them, and they also have a good temperament, so they're easy to handle. Okay, then I just want to finish off with sheep. Sheep was that second animal we usually farm with. Their characteristics, male and female. We have the ram is the male and the ewe is the female. If you can see here, rams usually have horns, but you actually do get male sheep without horns, like this guy. Okay, so how do we tell the difference if we didn't see the lambs with this picture? Then the male has usually a broader chest. If you look at the chest area, very big, pronounced neck and chest, whereas she looks a bit more dainty. Then also the male is very muscled and has a lot of wool, whereas the female has less muscle if you look at the butt area and so on as well, and a bit less wool than the male. Okay, then what do we use them for? We use them for meat, we mentioned. We also use them for we use them for meat, and we also use them for milk, because eventually we will make cheese from them. Yeah, for meat and for wool especially. And then we can also use them for pelts. Okay, but let's look at the dual purpose first. Dual purpose, again, as we just mentioned with the cattle, can be for both wool and meat. And if we want to make cheese from their milk and so on, we can do that from these types of breeds. So dual purpose, the first example would be a Duni Merino. So the Duni Merino is a pretty example of a ram. They are very highly pest resistant and adaptable to most climates. So they're very good animals actually to use if you want both wool and meat. Then we have the Dormer. The Dormer actually has a calm temperament, and also they mature early, so it means they can start reproducing and have babies early at an early stage. You can see this guy actually has a bit less wool than the Merino. So generally, I think the main function of this type of sheep will be for meat, not for wool, because it doesn't really have a lot of wool. You can see at the top of the face as well, the wool is not as thick on the forehead as, say, the Duni Merino. Then secondly, we only have the main mutton breeds. These we only breed for meat. Is first of all the Dorper. They are actually very distinctive. They have white bodies and always the black head. That's how we usually distinguish the dorper. So they are highly adaptable to any environment or climate, and they are easy to care for. They don't need as much food or babying or medication or anything. Then secondly is your Van Roy. Van Roy is actually the surname of the guy who invented them or created them. You can see they look very interesting, kind of funny flab pieces on the butt area, dewlap under the neck, and also the big chest area. So this guy is highly fertile, lots of babies, because we want them for meat, meaning we can sell them or have more meat available. Then they're also very parasite resistant. Okay, thirdly we have the wool breeds, like the Merino. It's a very good example. The Merino has high quality wool because this is why we're breeding them, and they are highly fertile and have a lot of babies. And then fourthly, we have a pelt breed. So the pelt breed, and the only example really, is the caracal. The caracal is actually from, let's just check again, it's actually from Central Asia, and is named after the place it was actually bred in Karakul. The town's name's Karakul. You can see they actually don't look like they have wool, it looks more like hair. That's actually what makes them more distinctive, and they are actually born black, and then eventually their wool becomes white. And sometimes they can have black faces as well. So they are highly resistant to internal parasites, which is good, so we don't always have to dose them against parasites, and they are highly adaptable, so they can actually adapt to our Southern African climate. And yes, that is it. The next one I will continue with goats.